So we are discussing Wu Mingyi's Man with Compound Eyes. It's a novel, all right, really interesting text. But before we get into the piece, we need to discuss the background or lay the context of the book for us. So a text like this is described as the novel has been described as an ecological parable. So if you want to understand what would be an ecological parable, we kind of need to begin by breaking down the whole idea of eco-criticism itself, because that would be center to our idea of a text like this. So eco-criticism is a field, or it's an interdisciplinary field that examines the relationship between literature, culture, and the environment. All right, and it explores how humans and the natural world are represented and how these representations shape our understanding of environmental issues. Personally, I like the definition by Camilo Gomaides. It's a really interesting one, so I'm just going to read it out. The field of inquiry that analyzes and promotes works of art which raises moral questions about human interactions with nature, while also motivating audiences to live within a limit that will be binding over generations. So, really interesting reading of what should be our understanding of eco-criticism. So now eco-criticism is interdisciplinary because it's blending natural history, science, literature, anthropology, and many other related fields to give us this nuanced and balanced perspective about the world around us. So the idea is that we are not just studying nature or how natural things are represented in literature or fiction or anything of that sort, but we're analyzing how all of this, all right, all of these representations of nature, either artistic, historical, ideological, all of these things contribute to our understanding of the world around us. All right, so there is this sense that maybe the analogies that are being drawn between nature and its representations may also have an impact in how it can influence our perspective of the world around us. You know, reading an influential book about how nature has been framed could possibly change our perspective of nature, could possibly change our way of interacting with nature. So there is that possibility that it could just have an, releasing such a text could actually revamp or revitalize ecological studies itself in society. So there is an important role for this. Now, ecofeminism, this is also a concept that people might be familiar with. It's actually an offshoot of eco-criticism. It sort of blends study of environment along with feminism, the idea that the oppression of women, the degradation of the environment, they're kind of interconnected because it's all rooted in patriarchal structures. Patriarchal structures largely believe in a power equation, and their idea is that they are important and everybody else is then subjected to their whims and fancies. So ecofeminism is also an interesting reading, but we are of course looking at how Man with Compound Eyes qualifies as an ecological parable. So it's basically a story or an analogy that comments on the environmental concerns of the world as well as highlighting the equation between the two. So we are looking at how this kind of an analogy may impact our way of reading the world, and it may also in many ways give us a much more broader perspective on the kind of themes and concerns that impact our world. Now, Wu Mingyi's novel Man with Compound Eyes is set in Taiwan, but we have characters that come from very different spaces. that sort of interact with each other. So we have our main figures. We have Alice. She's a former professor who's lost her will to live because she's lost her husband, her son. There's Atley. He is a second son from the isolated island Vaio that's described in the book. There's Hafe. She's a Panka woman who runs a cafe called Seven Sisid. There's Dahu. He's a Bunun climber as well as someone who studies mountains. Detlef, he's an engineering consultant, and he comes to Taiwan first for work and then later to observe a certain ecological phenomenon. Sarah is a marine biologist and an environmental activist. Her father is another very interesting figure. And then, of course, we have the titular character of the man with compound eyes, who is a very fascinating concept, one that I think we will break down a lot more as we sort of proceed with the novel. Now, the thing is that we have these characters coming from very diverse spaces, and one could sort of imagine what do they have to sort of do with the story, and why do they qualify as participants of an ecological parable. But the thing is, they do, because the idea that Wumi is sort of bringing out for us is that he's placing people from very different walks of life, from very different power equations, but also pointing out that they each one have a say in what's happening around us. To just their general framework cannot be a reason for us to criticize or, deny them access to this conversation. All right, and each one of them have their own perspective. So part of their stories is their life, their struggles, their grief. All right, and part of it has to do with their equation with the land and the sea around them. So we are looking at people as not isolated figures, but as figures who are part of an entire environment, a whole ecosystem. All right, and they may be inhabiting the same land, but their perspective of the land depends on their own perspective, where they come from, the space that they occupy. All right, because Alice, for instance, is Taiwanese, but she is Han Chinese, and so which means she's part of the people who migrated into Taiwan. All right, maybe 100 to 200 years ago, but they migrated into Taiwan. Atley is someone coming from an isolated island. There are many isolated islands in our world, many of whom have managed to, ward off any kind of influence from the outside, many of whom have been very tragically affected by the outside world as well. So, and it's actually a really complex world that Wumi gives us. The whole idea, the whole language. There's a culture, there's a history, there's an identity that's worn out, worn around this idea of Vaio, which is really fascinating. So it seems like part fantasy, and yet it's not. It's too real. Then you have Hafe. She's a Panka woman, so she belongs to an indigenous tribe from the Taiwanese islands. Dahu also belongs to an indigenous community. Detlef is clearly European, so is Sarah. Tom, that is Alice's husband, is also European. He's from Denmark. And so you have the idea that, they're outside of the space, they shouldn't have a say in it. No, not really, because what he's also trying to say is that the more we interact with nature, the more we seem to sort of compress the world, right? It's no more a global world, it's a local world. The more we compress the world, the more that things that happen in one part of the world will impact life in another part of the world. There is no way for you to say, that is not my problem, or this is not my problem. No, it will, because that's how we have made our world. All right, and that is really what the text is sort of commenting on. So now the text is divided into 11 parts. Each part has a different number of chapters, so it's not like set in stone. It's not like, every part is gonna have a set number of chapters. No, but each part is sort of framed around a common idea. So we're going to look at the common idea. We're also going to look at few sections within the text that qualify or sort of express those ideas very well. And that's kind of where we're sort of going to head with this entire piece. So, like I said, it seems like part fantasy because YOY was not a real island, though by the end of the book, I guarantee you're going to wonder if YOY is a real place. It's not. Yet it can equally be a blueprint for any isolated island out there. And the concerns that plague it could be the concerns that plague any isolated island there, or any space for that matter. Alright, it's the idea that many of the concerns delineated in the book are universal. Whether we acknowledge them or not is a whole different question. Alright, so let's get into Wu Mingyi's Man with Compound Eyes. We'll start with our next text, with our next segment, where we will look at parts 1 to part 6. Thank you.